are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media, and this is Weed Talk News.
And I'm Curt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Curt and I get together to talk about the news from the cannabis world from coast to coast. This week, it coincides with the Democratic National Convention in Milwaukee virtually. That's where Joe Biden accepted his party's nomination for the President of the United States.
And interestingly there, I think we're all hoping for a Democratic platform to feature cannabis legalization, make it one of maybe their top 5 or 10 things. Did not happen, Jimmy, but we did get talk of decriminalization, not legalization. What do you think of that?
Well, actually, I blogged about that on our website, procannabismedia.com this week, and I actually believe that's a win for cannabis. Now, we know that many cannabis advocates want it to be legalized completely, but I'll tell you what, 12 years ago, compared to where we were 12 years ago, the fact that we're actually talking about it, if they decriminalize it federally, open up the banks, that's a big win for the industry.
I'm going to say that's like kissing your sister. You can't be happy with a kiss after 4 years. That's I'm not going to settle for that one. I'm going to go for full legalization. I think backing down to decriminalization is just, let's throw those potheads a bone. And I don't think it's going to get us as far as you think. So I hope the Democratic Party and their platform, as the voters respond to them on the campaign trail, really move up legalization more than decriminalization.
Well, I believe as long as they declassify Schedule 1, they decriminalize it, they open up the banks and accept the Safe Banking Act, those are 3 really big wins in the right direction, Curt. And I'll take that, even though Earl Blumenauer thought decriminalization was for your grandmother. So I can relate to that because that's kind of age appropriate for me, I guess.
Well, you're a guy who likes a bud single. It still counts on the batting average. Just take the bud single and get on first. So speaking of money flowing into the industry, it's been quite a week for weed stocks. There's obviously some momentum behind them, thinking about a Democratic president as well as a House and Senate. So let's go to Deb Borchardt of the Green Market Report to tell us what's going on Wall Street.
Thanks, Curt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, Curaleaf reported a fantastic quarter this week. They came in with total revenues of $117.5 million. This was 142% better than the same time period last year and a 22% improvement sequentially. Now, the company did report net losses of $2 million, but this was better than the net losses of $24.5 million for the same time period last year. They said they think they can do managed revenues in the third quarter between $190 million and $200 million. The company said that Massachusetts recovery has been much faster than Nevada, which has been fairly slow. An e-commerce company that most people outside the cannabis industry don't know about is called Dutchie. They announced this week that they raised $35 million, bringing their total fundraising to $53 million. And then finally, the state of Maine said that they will begin permitting adult use cannabis sales coming up on October 9th. The state said it expects to begin issuing active licenses on September 8th, and we're hearing that Acreage Holdings and Curaleaf are some of the companies vying for those licenses. And that's it for this week. I'm Deb Borchardt from the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
Amazingly, the cannabis advocates are not giving up on passing anything in Congress this year. 4 attorney generals and a group of law enforcement pros are calling on Congress to pass a legalization bill this year. Quote, as frontline public safety experts, we believe that responsible regulation and control of marijuana will be more beneficial to society than prohibiting and criminalizing it, unquote. Meanwhile, on the CBD front, more confusion and delays from the FDA and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Curt, the FDA wants to put out for bid, they want to have one lab testing everything?
No, that's just it. You're starting to see a little of the government pillars start to have these lawsuits and requests not be brushed aside. So you have the FDA putting out bid to get 1,000 labs or get labs open. They want to test cannabis products. On the other side, you have the DEA lawsuit with the scientist that the judge ruled that he's not going to dismiss it, that it could be unconstitutional the way the DEA is blocking cannabis research. So some of these things that might have been poo-pooed a few years ago are starting to stick. So it's going to be good to see competition in the lab front. I don't think we should have one federal lab. There shouldn't be one federal anything at all. So I think creating a good environment and maybe policing it a little bit for that. Well, you and I have discussed the THC shopping, right? Taking your product and getting 3 different labs to test it, and whoever gets the highest THC rating, that's my guy. So we do have to police that a little bit, but certainly multiple labs is a good idea.
Multiple independent labs makes the most sense. Meanwhile, on the hemp front, 6 states are being asked to resubmit regulatory plans for hemp to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. For reasons not entirely clear, they've asked California, Colorado, Illinois, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Utah all to resend their proposals. Now, one stumbling block is some states want independent labs to be the testing process. And of course, the feds want that one lab. So again, Curt, independent versus federal, it seems to me that this should be a state issue no matter what they decide on hemp.
Yeah, absolutely. Does there need to be a standard that we all adhere to for certain variances with hemp or hot THC? Absolutely. But having the competition for quality of lab and for quality of testing, you're going to have to create multiple labs in multiple states. And this is just an argument that's been going on between the federal government and state governments for over 250 years, really. So we'll figure it out. Alcohol is shipped, alcohol is tested. If you get a Budweiser from Missouri or a Budweiser that's made in, Florida, you're going to get the same product. There's ways to do it.
Well, we look forward to seeing those ways. In the meantime, let's go down to our friend in Washington, D.C., Phil Adams from the Vote Pro podcast for the D.C. Report.
Hi, Phil Adams from Vote Pro podcast, here with the We Talk News D.C. Report. A federal appeals court has denied a motion from the Drug Enforcement Administration to dismiss a lawsuit challenging marijuana's Schedule I classification. The Scottsdale Research Institute filed suit last May in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The suit contends that the DEA's Schedule I status of cannabis hinders SRI's clinical research, the very research that the DEA requires in order to consider removing cannabis from Schedule I. The DEA's attempt to quash the lawsuit was turned down by the court earlier this week. In a separate lawsuit against the DEA, a coalition of medical marijuana patients and advocates are asking the Supreme Court to hear their case challenging the constitutionality of federal cannabis prohibition. This comes after a series of lower court rulings fell short. A U.S. District Court and the Second Circuit Court of Appeals both directed the plaintiffs to first seek administrative relief through existing channels, such as petitioning the DEA directly to reclassify cannabis as Schedule II. The plaintiffs declined, however, stating that reclassification would only limit access for patients and put thousands of legal cannabis companies out of business. The Supreme Court has yet to decide if they will hear the case. The FDA has given its approval to begin Phase 1 clinical trials of a synthetic cannabinoid drug as a potential treatment for severe cases of COVID-19. ARDS-003 is an injectable drug developed by cannabinoid pharmaceutical company Tetra Biopharma. The drug was created to help relieve acute respiratory distress syndrome, a severe condition that occurs in severe COVID patients. A randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled human study is scheduled to begin in December. That's the We Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
One more note from Washington, D.C., and it does involve our current POTUS, whose name I try not to use on this show, but for this, it is Donald Trump. So this week, he was in Wisconsin campaigning for re-election, and in typical Trump style, he turned it into a political forum, saying at a campaign rally that included Scott Walker, the former Republican governor of Wisconsin who lost in 2016 when marijuana was on that ballot. The quote here from our POTUS: "The next time you run, please don't put marijuana on the ballot at the same time you're running," Trump said, directing his advice to Walker, who of course was in the crowd. "You brought out like 1 million people that nobody ever knew were coming out. Like having more people exercising their right to vote is a bad thing. I guess it's a bad thing when it doesn't fit your agenda of re-election, Mr. POTUS." Curt, your comment?
It's those weed deplorables and untouchables or whatever Hillary said about the Trump supporters. So Trump has don't bring out those cannabis supporters. Who knew they'd get off the couch? Make sure you don't put marijuana on the ballot. So who knew that Trump thought of had his own deplorables list and intolerables, and it's the cannabis people.
Absolutely. Now, you can add Montana to the group of states who will be voting for state legalization of adult use of cannabis in November. The Big Sky country joins Arizona, South Dakota, and New Jersey on the ballot question in November 2020.
And just last night, if you're familiar with the West Coast and the Pacific Northwest in Oregon, which has had plenty of legal cannabis and had their price swings over the years, Jim Belushi, one of our favorite cannabis representatives out there, had his new show on the Discovery Channel. Just started. If you haven't seen it, you can certainly DVR it and pull it back up and catch up in the series. But Jimmy, let me ask you, what did you think of the opening Jim Belushi Cannabis Farm from Oregon show on the Discovery Channel?
Well, like Max Yasgur was back in 1969, I'm a farmer. That's what Max Yasgur said. Well, Jim Belushi, he embraces his farming of cannabis, and I found it very entertaining. In fact, one of the things that came out of that show was Jim Belushi basically saying that if medical marijuana was around, his older brother John would still be around. And I found that fascinating. But the characters that are on this show, Jim's family, you also hear from John's widow on this show, and also the Captain Jack strain guy. It's fun. It's a fun show. It's pro-cannabis. It's very well produced. And he's a tremendous character who has a great self-deprecating sense of humor. So I certainly recommend it. And I'm already looking forward to the next one. Of course, it is on Discovery Channel. And yes, you can get that on demand. So I enjoyed that. But since they were talking about Oregon, let's go up to the country where it is legal, and that would be north of the border, up to Canada, to Solomon Israel from MJ Biz Daily's International Division. Here's our Canadian Cannabis Report.
I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily International, and this is the Weed Talk News Canadian Cannabis Report. Canadian producers of cannabis edibles and beverages have been sitting on plenty of packaged, unsold product, according to new figures. That shows a disconnect between demand and supply, at least over the past spring. As of May, roughly 6.3 million packaged units of regulated edibles and beverages were sitting on shelves at producers, distributors, and retailers. In comparison, sales in May were about 1 million units. And Canada's government is being accused of cannabis protectionism by impeding foreign imports of medical marijuana into the country. Several international cannabis firms told Marijuana Business Daily that they faced serious difficulties accessing the Canadian medical marijuana market. The government of Jamaica said it will formally appeal to the Canadian government to review the situation. You can read all those stories and more at mjbizdaily.com. I'm Solomon Israel from Marijuana Business Daily.
Here's this week's factoid on the cannabis industry from MJ Biz Daily's 2020 Fact Book. Did you know the number of people working in the United States cannabis industry is expected to jump by 50% from 240,000 to 295,000 by the end of this year, slightly higher than the number of computer programmers employed in the United States. It's now estimated that between 20 and 2024, the industry will add 250,000 full-time equivalent jobs. You can get that fact and many more at mjbizdaily.com. The cannabis industry is tapping into the general counsel world and the pool of candidates now for CEO. Leafly named their former general counsel, Yoko Miyashita, as their CEO. And that's not the only news coming out of Leafly. Curt, you've got some more in the cannabis world?
You're seeing a lot of dry powder coming off the sidelines, again, with this hope for legalization. Now it's coming on the tech side. So up until this point, we've seen touch the flower, revenues, REITs, leasebacks, things are like those. But just this week, 3 cannabis tech companies got over $10 million each, and Dutchie leading the way, as Deb mentioned, with 35. You had Springberg getting over 10 million, which is a rewards program for people going to dispensaries. You have Philo, which is regulation, as well as some menu management, getting another funding round. So what's interesting is Leafly has a new CEO. You also have 3 or 4 big cannabis tech plays, if you want to call them big already, getting money and funding. So things are starting to happen on the tech side and on the internet side, which is always good news.
And the investment side. And one more note, a former general counsel named Jennifer Thomas is the new CEO of Province Brands of Canada. So finally tonight, you might remember a group back in the 60s, and I know you don't, Curt, but have you ever heard of Jefferson Airplane?
Absolutely.
All right, good. Well, you know, they wrote a song and they wanted to go ask Alice about the drugs Mama gives you that don't do nothing at all. Well, now you just have to ask Anna for weed. Anna is short for analytics. And now that is the name of the weed vending machine that made its debut in Colorado dispensaries this past week. So, Curt, go ask Anna for weed.
You'll be asking Anna for weed for about another 3 months. Then you're going to be asking Alexa for weed and Hey Google for weed once federal legalization happens. So, Anna, enjoy your 15 minutes. I hope it works out, but it's going to be, Hey Alexa, I need to order some weed here, probably next year.
And maybe get it from cannabis.net someday, huh?
Yeah, that could be programmed in. You never know.
All right, Curt. Well, that'll do it for this week's Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Curt Dalton from Cannabis.net.
Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Weed Talk Now, Weed Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, Cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the WeedTube, and YouTube. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.